You may have seen my previous video where I bought a basic Honeywell DIY install burglar alarm system to sort of set up in my flat, and in that video I found that it was absolutely terrible, completely useless, couldn't even remotely consider using it, so I returned it. Well, now we're back with a new system I've bought that should be significantly better. So this new kit I've bought here is the Texecom Premier Elite 64-W. And whereas the kit I was looking at before was more sort of home DIY install type kit, this is more the sort of kit you'd actually get a professional to install. It's a much higher end system. Now, I will first of all, as a sort of full disclaimer, I am not an alarm installer. I have no real idea of what I'm doing, and I'm probably going to be a bit out of my depth with this because this is designed for like professionals to install. But the documentation does seem pretty good, in fact better than that Honeywell, so hopefully I'll be able to get it going. This system was quite expensive, whereas the cheap DIY kit I bought was, I think, about 150. This was £300 in total for the whole kit. The actual kit I have here was about 240, and then I had to buy some other bits to make it work we'll take a look at later, so in total I paid about 300 for this whole system. However, it's significantly better than the DIY kit. One of the issues with the cheap DIY systems is that they have one-way communications. This means that a PIR can send a message to the keypad, and the keypad can send a message to the siren, but the devices can't talk in the other direction. This means the controller doesn't have a view of the whole system. It can't see the health of a PIR, and it can't see if a device is out of range, which was the issue I was experiencing with Honeywell, where the siren was out of range, and the control panel had no idea about this problem. This system, on the other hand, being a much higher end system, has two-way communications. That means that the controller can talk to the sensors, and the sensors can talk to the controller, which is a much better way of doing it, because the controller can now see the state of the system, it can monitor the health, and it can detect if sensors disappear or go out of range. So it should be significantly more reliable and a lot more secure. So what we'll do is, we'll take a look through the box, see what it comes with, take a look at each accessory it comes with. I'll then go and install it, and then we'll come back and see what it's like. Now, again, I am not a professional, so this will more be the sort of a video to watch if you're thinking about buying a system like this to install yourself, and we'll see how easy it is for a complete novice to install. I'm probably going to do things wrong, so don't take what I say in this video as the way you're meant to do it, but hopefully we'll be okay. One of the other selling points of this is that it has Texecom's Ricochet wireless system. This is effectively a mesh network. So whereas a lot of these systems don't have that, effectively each controller or each PIR or door sensor has to be able to talk to the main control unit. With the Ricochet system, it's a mesh network. So if you've got a PIR that's too far away from the controller, the system will understand that, and that PIR can then bounce messages through other devices on the network until they reach the controller, which should allow it to work over wider ranges and in buildings where there's maybe brick walls and stuff in the way. That's one of the things that sold me on this system, because with the Honeywell system I had issues with the controller in the hall being able to reach the siren on the outside of the building, whereas hopefully with this, I imagine the signal from the controller will be stronger, so it'll work okay. But if it doesn't, I can still have it, it'll hopefully still be able to cope by bouncing the signal through PIRs and stuff, so that's definitely a big selling point of this. So now let's take a look inside and see what we get. So the outside of the box is completely plain, it's not really designed to be bought in a retail store, so there's no real fancy branding on it. In fact, I did have to buy this from a more specialist electrical distributor, which for me was this place called PowerSaver, who, they're just online, they seem to be pretty good, and it was one of the places that had it, and they had it definitely in stock. Other places didn't seem to have stock on this particular kit. So that's where I bought it from, but there are other places. I think Alert Electrical also sold these, and a couple of other CCTV places had them. So here's the box, let's go inside. So open it up and see what we get. So first thing we get is a little bag of documentation, effectively. So there's this V4 changes guide, which I think is like a change log, or sort of like a difference between the manual it comes with and then what it's now like with the new firmware, because this has got an updated firmware on it. You then get the standard user guide, then you also get obviously a manual for the PIR and a couple of other bits like that, and then you get this CD. Now this CD contains manuals, so this will contain the full setup and service manual rather than just the basic user guide, but it also contains two pieces of software. These allow you to configure and monitor the system when it's running. Now to do this you need a special cable that connects from the control panel into a PC over a USB or serial connection. That cable isn't sold with this, and it's about £30 to buy it separately. However, looking at it, it looks very similar to just a standard TTL to USB serial converter cable. So I didn't buy it, and I'll try using my own cable and see if I can get it working. If not, I might have to go and buy that cable or just not use this software. But yes, you can actually connect it to a PC and fully configure and manage the system, which is a huge flexibility bonus over other lower end systems. So that's the sort of documentation you get. Now we get the interesting stuff, which is the actual hardware. So first thing we get here is the door contact. We'll take a look at each of these one by one, so we'll just take them out of the box first, but that's the door contact. You get one of these in this kit. They do different kits that come with different things. You get this cable, which I'm not sure what it's for. I would need to look into it a bit more. There's a connection on the back of this keypad for engineer's keypad, so I'm wondering if it's to do with that, so I'll maybe need to look the manual up to work out what this is for. But speaking of the keypad, here's the keypad. So this is what goes in the wall in an accessible location when you're coming in. So you see it's got an LCD screen on the front. Again, a big benefit over the old system because I can now see what it's doing and I get proper status out of it rather than it just beeping and flashing lights. It's just a lot clearer. And then in here you've got a full-on keypad with nice physical buttons that you can easily feel rather than like the stupid touchpad thing you get on some of them. This is like proper buttons that should work really well. It's also got proximity, so you can use RFID tokens on it, which it does come with. And yeah, that is the control panel there, which can obviously just be wall mounted fairly neatly. And it runs on just a few batteries. I don't know what they actually take, but it's got a few batteries pre-installed, so we'll take a look at those later. Next up under here, we get another layer, which contains the PIRs. So we get, with this kit, you get 3 PIRs, which are all fairly neat little things. A bit neater than the ones the Honeywell system came with. And they also screw shut, which is good. Because the Honeywell ones just clipped shut, and I was always scared they'd pop open and then set off tamper protection because they didn't clip that well. Whereas this is seem a lot better, and they're fairly neat little things that can sit up in the corner of a room. So they're quite decent. You next get this little box of proximity tokens you can use. So the idea is you can enroll these into the system and then set and unset the system just by scanning it on the keypad. From a security perspective, I'm always in two minds over these things. They're really convenient, but my concern with using this would be that I'd be carrying a thing on my keyring to disable my alarm. So if I say lost my jacket, that would contain my keys to get into the flat, the keypad, the fob to disable the alarm, and then my wallet would have my address in it. So it's probably being overly paranoid, given that's quite unlikely to, someone's unlikely to find a jacket and then go and burgle the house, but I don't think I'll probably use these. I think I'll just stick to using a code. That way the thing to unset my alarm is in my head, not on me. But they're nice to have, and there's probably applications where these could be quite good. Suppose, say for example, like if you have kids or like elderly people who maybe can't remember a code or would struggle to remember a code, this is a lot easier than just not setting the alarm if they can use one of these. So it's a nice little idea. And actually the other benefit with these as well, I suppose, is if you're, say, in a corporate environment where you might fire people or have people leave the company, you could take tokens back from them or revoke the token from the system without having to change the code, so it's not like having a code that everyone in the company knows. Instead, each person has their own unique token. So there is an advantage there, but for domestic use like I'm doing now, I don't think I'll use these. Next in the box you get the large unit, which is the main controller. Now this is something you don't get with the DIY kits, and that's why the control panel itself is so small, is that it has this giant main control unit. This has a lot of stuff in it, so I think you can also connect wired sensors and stuff to this as well. It's got a huge amount of stuff in it, and it's significantly larger than it needs to be really, but it's a standard size for these sorts of units. So the idea with this is that you'd put it away somewhere in a sort of relatively secure, inaccessible location, so like hide it in the back of a cupboard or something. And then the separate keypad goes somewhere accessible so you can control the system from the keypad, but the actual brains of it are all in here. It also means if someone breaks in, if this is in a more secure location, they can't really tamper with this or destroy it as easily. So that's why you have this big control panel, which is bulky, but they're relatively easy to find a space to hide because it doesn't need to be accessible. So usually like in the back of a cupboard or something is absolutely fine for these things. And we'll take a look inside this later. And now finally in the box, you get one more thing, which is the external siren. Not all of these kits come with a siren, so check, because some of them don't include it. But this is the siren you get, which is, I think they call it the Odyssey X. Again, it's a battery-powered wireless external siren, so here it is. So you get 2 packs of batteries. These are Energizer lithium, that's quite good. Double A's, you get 8 of those, can't count, and it needs all 8 to run. They actually recommend, as far as I'm aware, that you need to use lithium batteries for outdoor use because of the temperature range. I think the issue is that normal batteries could potentially freeze, so these will work down to lower temperatures. So that's why you need these, but it's a good job it includes them. And next we get the siren. And now you'll see it looks weird, that's because, and we'll see it in a second, you have to buy a separate cover for this, it doesn't include the cover. But this is the internals of the siren, so the idea is you'd mount this on the wall and then you'd fit the cover on it. And we'll take a look at this later. Seems like quite a nicely built little thing, so that's it there. And this actually does include a installation manual as well for mounting it. Now, as I mentioned, you do need extra bits for this. So obviously we've got the siren internals here, but the extra bit you have to buy is the cover. So here's the one I bought. They do a fairly big range of these. I think the idea is that they don't include it so you can pick ones that are styled differently. So this is the octagonal one that I bought, and these come with either white or black plastic and then several different colours of lights sort of surround here. So I went for the blue one. They also do a rectangular one, so the idea is you can pick whatever colour and style you want. Again, this comes from the perspective of alarm companies because they can potentially pick what colours they want and style them. And it also has this area here you can actually remove and put a logo in it in a card to actually brand it. So the idea is if you're an alarm installer company, you can put your company's branding in here, but I'll obviously just have it without branding, there's no point. But yeah, that is the cover you have to buy. These are fairly cheap though, I think this was about £7.50, something like that. It was relatively cheap, it wasn't a big problem having to buy that separately. The next thing I had to buy was an alarm battery. This is to go in that big control unit, so if the mains power dies, because that thing is mains powered, this will continue powering the system. So this is a 12 volt 7 amp hour one, which is just what the website I bought it from recommended and said it was compatible with this system. It wasn't too bad, it was about £10, so it's fairly expensive, but these things should last a very long time. And obviously it's rechargeable and everything, so you should only need to replace it if it ever failed. And then the final thing I bought that isn't required is I just bought one extra PIR, just because I wanted one in there's one room that wouldn't have a PIR out of the 3 that came here, so I just bought an extra one. It's identical to the ones that came with the kit. They're fairly expensive though. I think this PIR was, just looking at a piece of paper, yeah, this PIR was about £35, so the PIRs themselves are quite expensive, but they're quite nicely designed, nice quality ones. Now it's also worth mentioning the accessories you get with these. You can get a huge range of different PIRs. The ones it comes with are these, which are pet safe PIRs, which I don't have a pet, but I might get one down the line, so it could be useful. They also do all different types. They do higher sensitivity ones, they do dual technology ones that require microwaves to detect as well as infrared, so they're potentially more accurate. You can also get various different types of door sensors. You can get smoke sensors, heat sensors, carbon monoxide sensors. So you can really upgrade the system with a lot more functionality than just basic PIRs and door sensors. And that's the good thing with buying from a sort of system like this from a reputable company that makes alarms professionally. You get a lot of availability of different parts for them. It's not like the DIY kits where you maybe get like PIRs and a couple of door sensors and that's really it. With this system you can get a huge range of different things. Plus you can also add multiple things. You can add multiple external sirens. I think with this system you can even have up to 4 keypads. So if you had like multiple entrance doors, you can put a keypad at each door, which is also potentially a good feature. Although these also are quite expensive. But yeah, that is what the kit contains. So what we'll now do is we'll quickly go in and take a closer look at each component, and then I'll go away and install it. So now here we have one of the PIRs we'll take a quick look at. So yeah, it's a PIR. It looks fairly standard, with various bits on the back to put screws through to mount it. They also do sell brackets to mount these if you needed to angle it in a funny way, but they should just be able to mount straight on a wall, which is what I'll be doing. And yeah, they're screwed shut on the bottom, which is really good from a sort of safety perspective. They don't just, there's no risk of it just popping open, because obviously if one of these pops open, the tamper protection will be triggered and the alarm will go off. So that just opens like that and then should just pop off. There we go. And you can see in here, there's a very nice looking PCB. Looks like quite a nice quality board. There's a little spring here, that's tamper protection. That's just a spring on top of a button. And it's all powered through a little sort of CR123 lithium battery. So that's a 3 volt battery. It should have a really long battery life. The manual for the PIR says 3 years, which is pretty good, so that's pretty neat in there. You've also got this pulse count jumper you can adjust, so that lets you adjust how sensitive it is. So to be more sensitive you can move it, so it's currently on 2 pulse, so that's less sensitive, so you can increase that if you wanted to. The other thing it has here is another type of tamper protection. So the idea with this is so that if it's ripped off the wall, it can also be detected. So what they've done here, which is quite a clever design I suppose, is on the back, you can see that this is sort of got a weaker spot around it, sort of cut out. That's to make this a weak spot in the plastic, so that when you've got a screw through here or on the side here, if the PIR were to be ripped off the wall, this should fracture around here and this plastic would break out. And then that bit of plastic is then securely screwed onto the PCB with this screw here, which you can make out around it has the PCB cut away and it's weakened. So I think the idea is if someone were to rip the PIR off the wall when it's screwed in here, this screw would snap that area of the PCB off, break a track, and then cause the system to be detected and then send out an alert and trigger tamper protection. You don't have to use that, but to get the full sort of grade 2 compliance for the system that they say it has, you need to be using this. So yeah, to mount it to the wall, you can just put a screw through there and that will also protect it against the event of it being ripped off the wall, which is another fairly good feature of this PIR. So the next bit of kit we'll look at is the door contact. So this is the door contact here, which they actually do in multiple colours, which is really clever. So if you've got a sort of coloured door, you can actually buy the right colour to match, which is quite neat. I've just got the white one, but my door's white, so that's completely fine. So with this you get 2 little bits. It's actually really small, which is nice. Very standard. You get a magnet and you get the door sensor itself. And it's got like there's a tamper sensor on the back, so I think that's tamper sensor anyway. Not quite sure. And it might be on the inside if you put a screw through it. So that's probably some sort of tamper thing on the back. But yeah, it's fairly neat. And that should just pop open somehow to let you install batteries. Can't quite figure out how to do it right now, but it should be relatively easy to open up. There we go, so I've been able to actually open this just with a little screwdriver in the top. And that pops open. And yeah, there we go, so there's a little CR2450, not heard of that, but yeah, a little 3-volt lithium coin cell in there, and that's your door sensor. And I think this is actually tamper protection, because what you can see is it's similar to the alarm. There's a screw that you'd put through there, and then there's this little bit that sticks out that would go into this hole here and trigger a switch. So I think the idea is, again, that you screw that to the wall through that, that'll hold the switch in, and if it was ripped off the wall, that switch would release, and again, the tamper protection would be triggered. So that's quite neat as well. They're very small little things, which is a lot nicer than that Honeywell one. So I'm very happy with the style of this, and there's a little button on the front for pairing it that lights up for some reason, but that'll be to pair it with the main unit. So yeah, pretty neat little system. And obviously it comes with sticky pads and screws to fix it to a door. The next piece you get is the main control panel, which is here, which is a very nice little thing. It looks quite neat. They also do different versions, so you can get it in different colours, and you can get a flush mount one you could recess into a wall, but this doesn't stick out really that far. You've got a nice LCD screen at the top here with a few different LEDs around it, and this flaps down to reveal the buttons, so you can hide the buttons when it's not in use. And they're very nice little, I think they're backlit keys, feel fairly tactile, they're quite nice little things, so that should be fairly easy to navigate the system. See on the back there's a way to mount it to a wall, which should just pop off. There's a screw on the bottom, so hopefully if we undo that screw we can get inside it a little bit more. Nope. Let's take that screw out. And imagine here there'll also be suitable tamper protection so that if it was removed from the wall, the system would detect it. There we go, and that just slides off. So now that's removed. You can see in here, yep, there's tamper protection, there's a little micro switch in there. And this runs on 4 AA's. And then there's a connection there for the engineer's keypad. That would be what that cable it came with for. I don't actually know how this works. My guess would be that you could put this cable and plug it internally into the main control unit when you're setting it up, potentially to pair this, but I don't quite know, so I would need to read the manual. But yeah, that's the main control panel. Now the next bit to look at is the external siren. So here's the internal unit. The other bit's just a bit of plastic, so there's no real point in looking at that in detail, although it does feel very well made. But here's the external siren. So there's a battery compartment in here you can open up, so there's a little screw there that needs to loosen it off a little bit. But But the whole thing feels fairly well made. It's all sort of thick polycarbonate. And hopefully that just opens somehow. There we go, that opens up. And then hinges out like that. That's very nice, hinges out like that. So this is where you put the batteries, which are those 8 AA's it came with. And then you install them into this holder, so that hinges out like that, and you can put batteries on both sides. Fairly. There we go. And then internally there's a few other bits. So you can see there's the sort of tamper switch here, which is pointing out the back of the unit. There's the main siren itself. And there's this fairly neat small PCB, which includes power and comfort LEDs. So you can actually use that to switch power to the alarm on and off, switch LEDs on and off. And then you can also change the sounder time between 15 minutes and 3 minutes, which means that if the system was constantly going off, it has to have a cutout due to like regulations. So you can either set that to 15 minutes or 3 minutes. There's also weirdly a sort of high voltage area down here, so I don't know what that would be for, because there's no real high voltage components in this, but it does have that, so that's maybe for flashing the LED or to do with the siren, I'm not sure, but that's down there. And it's also got this quite large antenna down here, this sort of little coil, so that looks like it should be quite good for getting a signal when it's outside. And then there's a few LEDs down the bottom for the comfort LEDs. And also nicely, like a TV bracket, it includes a built-in spirit level, which should make it easier to mount. Mounting this to the wall also looks fairly easy. Essentially, there's this little sort of hook on the back, hook it on a screw, and then there's these 2 further bits here you can put another screw through on each side to secure it. And these are quite good because they slide up and down, so they're easily positionable, and the screw can go side to side. So you've got quite a bit of flexibility when mounting this, which should make it relatively easy to mount. So yeah, that is the external siren. And now the final piece of hardware we'll look at is the main control unit, which is this large box here. It's held together with a couple of screws on each side, so that's fairly easy to undo. If I remember correctly, it does come with little caps to put over those to make it look a bit nicer. That screw just comes out. And it'll be interesting to see inside this, because it'll have the main control PCB for the whole system. And this system's insanely expandable. That's the other thing I forgot to mention, is there's all different modules you can get for this. So I'm pretty sure you can connect wired sensors and sounders up to this, but it also supports things like connecting external network interfaces. So while this device isn't networked normally, Texecom sell an external network interface that does Wi-Fi and Ethernet that you can plug into this internally, have it sitting to the side, and network this whole thing. So it's very flexible in that respect. So hopefully we can now get into this. You'll undo those 2 screws. Yep, front just comes off. And here's the inside. So the layout of this looks quite nice. So up here, you've got this main PCB, which has these 2 things here that look like a little sort of antennas for the wireless part. There's then this large cable here, labelled Digimodem. So this will be for some sort of external accessory, probably some sort of phone dialer, or maybe that networking accessory they sell. You've also got this power supply down here, which is a sort of proper switch mode power supply, which goes to these mains terminals here. There's then this sort of fuse holder here that contains a little fuse, and then a separate fuse down here that's not actually in it, so I'm guessing this is maybe a spare you can have on hand in case the fuse blows. And then you can just screw some mains connections in here, so it does need to be earthed and then just live and neutral. This area down here is then where you install the battery, and it comes with sort of mounting hardware that you can screw in there, and it seems to be sort of designed to hook onto the battery to hold it in place. Down here it also contains these little things, which are effectively like little screw covers to cover the screws on the front of the device. Up on the PCB you've also got various little things, so that's probably the main processor there. That'll be the firmware version that's stored on it. There's then an expansion port here for other hardware, as well as 2 COM ports. One of these is used for the external network connection, the other one of these can also be used for that USB interface to connect it up to a regular PC and use their software. Then up here you've got that tamper switch that you can, that's pressed in by the front panel, so when it's removed the siren will go off or it'll detect its tamper. Round the outside here, there's then various connections. So these are for various zones for sensors. Here's the connection for the siren. SPK, that'll be for a speaker. There's obviously a speaker built into this somewhere. There's a speaker built in behind here. So this can operate as a siren as well, I imagine. And that's wired in there. Various auxiliary voltage connections, and then various other connections that I don't quite know what they're for. But these will all be for wired accessories. Because I'm using the system entirely wirelessly, I won't actually be using any of these. But yeah, there's a fair bit of very nice sort of circuit board layout. It looks very nicely made, quite a good quality board. So yeah, it looks quite nice. One thing I don't understand is it comes with this large bag of resistors, so I'll need to look up the manual to see what this is for. I don't think I'll need them obviously because I'm not actually connecting any wired accessories, but it does come with a giant bag of resistors for some reason. I suppose if I don't need them for this, I'll be able to use them for other stuff, but yeah. Don't know why it comes with those, but they're probably used for some sort of sensors or, don't know, pull-up resistors if you've got certain types of PIRs? Not sure, but it comes with those anyway in case you need them. I imagine if you're going to need them, you're probably going to know what you're doing when you're setting this up. Given I'm just doing the wireless stuff, I'm hoping they won't be required. But yeah, it looks like a fairly nice unit. So I'll just need to find a place to mount this, probably in the back of a cupboard, screw it to the wall and then connect a power supply to it, which shouldn't be too painful to do. So there we go. That is all the equipment that came with the kit, as well as a few extra bits that I had to buy additionally. So it definitely looks like a very nice system. The hardware feels really nicely made. So hopefully I can set it up. That's the only bit I'm nervous about, just because it is such a complicated, powerful system that it's going to be quite tricky to set up. It's not going to be a nice, easy plug this in, switch this on, and it'll just magically work type system. It's going to take a fair bit of work to get this going. But hopefully it'll work really well, and almost certainly it'll be significantly better than that stupid Honeywell system I bought previously. So now I'll go away, get this all installed and set it up, and hopefully I'll be coming back to you with it all installed and working, and not come back to you with it not working or with it all broken or something. So hopefully I'll be back in a minute. So as you can see, the system is now installed. So up here we have the keypad, which we can open up and wake up, and as you can see, it's running. So what we'll do now is we'll go around and look at all this equipment I've installed, look at how I've installed it all, and I'll talk about how well it works and how easy it was to set up. So overall when setting this up, I didn't really have any major issues. I didn't film the general process just because it was going to take years if I was going to do that, but the basic process is that you connect the panel up and power it on, and you plug this keypad in, which is the wireless one, with that cable. So you've got that engineer's keypad cable, you plug one end into the back of this, and one end into one of the COM ports on that main PCB inside the panel. This then acts as the wired keypad, so you can then set the system up. Then the general process really is just a case of assigning all the pairing all the devices, which is dead simple. You just go into the menu on this, say go to the Learn Ricochet option, pick a zone that you want to assign the device to. Each device needs to go on its own zone. You get up to 40 though, so you can have loads of devices. It then says power up device now. You connect the battery to the device you want to pair, and it just pairs and it works. Then beyond that, it's just a case of setting up all the zones. So for example, configuring the zone as to whether it's an entry zone, which is like the main door where you open the door and it does a countdown, or if it's a guard zone, which basically means if that zone gets triggered, it goes off instantly. There's then many other options around the zones that I'm not going to get into right now, but you can do a lot of very flexible configuration with them. Outside of that, then it's just a case of setting up all the appropriate user codes and you're ready to go. The only major issue I had was pairing this keypad as a wireless device. That's because I had to use this keypad wired in order to go into the menu option to say I wanted to learn a device. According to the documentation, it supposedly just works. You connect the keypad in with a wire, you switch it on, and according to the manual anyway, it seems that this is just meant to automatically pop up and say, do you want to pair? And it just does it. But for me, it wouldn't do that. It wasn't behaving like the manual said it would. Now, I don't know if that's a firmware difference or maybe, something like that, or if when I've taken this out of the box and first powered it up, I've somehow managed to skip the first time power up setup guide. I don't know, but I couldn't get that to work. After much trial and error, I figured it out though. What I ended up doing was plugging this in with a cable, going into the menu to learn device like I was doing with all the other devices, and saying that I wanted to learn. As soon as it came up with a message saying power up device now, I then quickly pulled the cable out the back of this keypad, which causes it to reboot. When it reboots, it then says, the keypad then asks if I want to make it discoverable so it can be learned. You say yes to that, and as long as you do that quickly enough, it then pairs, and that worked absolutely perfectly. So that was a bit of a faff because it wasn't documented in the manual, but I did get it going in the end, so that's fine. That probably doesn't make sense to anyone watching this unless you've got the system in front of you, but if people do buy the system and have issues setting it up, that's how I end up getting around it. So the only other issue I had when setting this up was that when I first switched it all on, it would continuously go in tamper mode and it would just say that loads of zones were tampered with. In particular, it was always saying zones 1 to 8 were tampered with, along with the zone expander. So again, it was just me not knowing what I was doing, so it alludes into a bit more detail. Turns out all it was is that there was wired zones in there that weren't connected, And when they're not connected, obviously it doesn't see anything there and goes thinking there's been a tamper. So I tried jumpering out each of the wired zones, which some people said would work, but it still didn't help. But all I needed to do was go into the menu on this and mark each zone as not used. So all the first 8 zones, which are the wired ones, I just said, nope, they're not used, and it works fine since. The only other issue, it kept popping up saying that there was a tamper with the zone expander. Did a bit more research online, and apparently there was a jumper inside, which I found, which was for system commissioning. I just had to remove that jumper, which I think was saying the system was ready to be commissioned or something like that, some sort of jargon, but removing that jumper fixed that problem as well. So it was a bit fiddly to get it set up, but it was okay. So while it was a little bit fiddly to get it set up, it was perfectly doable for a novice like me. I wouldn't buy this if you're completely, a technophobe and you hate trying to figure out bits of technology that are a bit vague. But as long as you can sort of read between the lines, interpret maybe what it's doing a bit, use a little bit of guesswork and do a bit of Googling, it was completely fine setting this up. The manual wasn't hugely comprehensive, but there's plenty of information online for it. And according to people in the comments in my previous video, Texecom have really good support for sort of novices. I didn't try Texecom support, but supposedly the support is actually really good if you phone them up, even if you're not a registered installer. So, yep, overall, it's actually a pretty good system for setting up as a complete novice. So what we'll now do is we'll go around and take a look at all the other equipment I've installed and see how I fitted it all. So now here we have some of the PIRs that I've installed. So these ones are all mounted in the corners of rooms, which was dead easy to do. It's just a case of positioning it up in the corner, putting screws through the plastic and putting them into the wall. The only thing you need to really be careful of is that top right hand corner with the tamper protection. You need to make sure that that's very securely attached to the wall, because that's the one that if someone tries to rip it off the wall, you want there to be enough sort of force holding it to the wall that that plastic can rip out and not just rip the screw out the wall. So on some of them where I've been able to install it, there's been a stud behind that corner, so the screw's gone straight into that and it's been nice and secure. On others, I've not been able to do that because there's just been an empty space behind it. So on those ones, I've used a proper plasterboard roll plug, screwed into that, and that means it's held on really securely. I've had to be a bit careful placing these PIRs because it can be a bit tricky because it needs to be placed somewhere that it can see someone walking past it, but it also can't see out into the hallway. That's because I quite often leave the doors open when I'm out, and I can't have any PIR seeing into the hallway because I move around in the hallway when I'm unsetting the alarm. And these are all set up so that if I walk in front of one, it will instantly trigger the system, even if it's doing its 30-second countdown. So I've had to position them quite carefully so that I can walk around in the hall without being seen by any of them, but as soon as I walk into any of the rooms off the hall, it will go off. The only PIR I had a difficulty positioning was this one here. And that's because in this room, there's not really a corner I could safely put it in. Along one wall is some big floor-to-ceiling cupboards, so I couldn't really put it there because there's stuff stored on top of them, so they would just block the view of it completely. The other corner has a door, so when that door is open, it would block the view of the PIR, and I tend to leave the doors open quite often. Then the other corners face out to the hall, so if I was to put the PIR in those corners, it risks catching me in the hall. So the only place I could really put it was here, but it's not a corner, so I've had to mount it flat to the wall. However, that was also absolutely fine. I just had to put the screws through the back, and I was even able to get that tamper protection connected fine, so it's properly fixed onto the wall with that wall removal tamper protection intact. It's just flat to the wall. So it's not maybe as good for detection due to the sort of view it has, but it still does detect you walking around in the room, so it's not as good, but you can mount them to the wall just like that if you need to do it flat to the wall. The final sensor I've installed is this door contact here, which is also relatively easy to do. You've just got the magnet mounted to the door, and then the main unit mounted to the door frame. I've been able to screw both of these on rather than using sticky pads, so I don't have to worry about it falling off. They're completely securely held on there. The only real difficulty I had is just this door frame, this sort of artistic, sort of curved style with bits sticking out, so it was quite hard to mount it flush to it. So all I had to really do was just chisel out behind this just to make a slightly more flat area, mainly removing this piece here, just so it mounts on. But now it's on there, it's completely secure. It also has quite a good range because this door does have quite a big gap down the side, especially when this has to be mounted at an angle and this has to mount back a little bit into the door. So there is quite a large gap between the two, but that's absolutely fine. It's pretty strong, so it works absolutely fine even at that distance. So yeah, the door contact works pretty well. I've also installed the siren outside. I've not filmed that just because it's a bit dark now and I don't want to really be seen by my neighbours as a weirdo filming his burglar alarm. But the siren outside also went up absolutely fine, and it's really good to mount. Those adjustable mounts I showed previously make it really easy to fit, because my building has really uneven brick. It's a sort of artistic style of brick that's very sort of curved and shaped, which means it's quite hard to mount something flat to it. Being able to move those bits up and down really helped. It meant I could get it easily sort of level, and it meant I could avoid bits of brick that weren't going to be easy to drill into. And also let me avoid things like if it was lining up so I was going to have to drill into the mortar, I was able to move it up and down so I could miss it and go straight into the brick. The tamper protection screw on the siren was also really good, as it meant I could easily adjust the tamper protection so that it sits flush against the brick. Because of the texture of brick, the previous Honeywell system didn't really work properly because the button that pops at the back for tamper protection sort of fell into a dip in the brick and it wouldn't push in hard enough. Whereas this system has that screw that was able to screw out until it's touching the brick. And that did the job. It's now holding that tamper protection in perfectly, so if a siren's ripped off the wall, it'll instantly trigger. Now what you can see here is the main panel. So it's mounted in the back of a cupboard. The idea behind that is just to keep it far away from anywhere an intruder can get to without setting the system off. So I didn't want to mount it in the hall cupboard or next to the front door because potentially someone could break in, trigger the 30-second countdown, and then they'd have 30 seconds to try and tamper with this in order to disable it. Realistically, that would be quite difficult because it's got tamper protection, and if you destroyed the panel, I think the system would probably go off, but putting it here is just safer. So it's in the back of a cupboard in a room that's protected by a PIR. The idea being is that if someone breaks in and gets into this room to get up to the panel, as soon as they start moving around this room, they'll set the whole system off instantly. So that means they wouldn't actually be able to get to the panel in theory without setting it off. And it's quite neatly mounted in the cupboard. It's completely hidden in the back, doesn't take up really much space. And as you can see at the top, there's a bit of black mains flex going into the top right of the panel. That's carrying the mains power into it. So it's a standard 3-core mains cable going in, and that's all it is. This also obviously contains that backup battery. So what we'll do now is we'll pop the cover off and take a look inside it. So now here we can see inside the panel, and it's quite nice, lots of very satisfying lights inside here. As you can see, we've just got the antennas over here as well as the main board, but now we can see we've got the battery installed, which just sits on this here, and those two little hooks sit above just to stop it being lifted out, and then those two wires connect it up. The main supply then just comes along this flex here, and goes into this terminal block here, so it's all fairly neat. You can hear it beeping every so often, that's just because the tamper protection is active because the front's been removed. In order for me to open this without setting the system off, along with opening any of the other sensors, you just have to log into the system as an engineer and leave it sitting in the engineer's menu, and then you can open it up safely. In here you've also got all the other connections, so you've got the wired zones down here, various outputs as well as the COM ports, which you can use to connect things like the Ethernet modules, the Wi-Fi module, as well as the USB to serial interface cables can also connect into this to connect it up to a PC, which we'll take a look at next. So yeah, that's the inside of the panel. So now let's look at the PC side of things and how we can configure and monitor the whole alarm system from a PC. So as I mentioned before, Texecom sell special cables that will connect the panel directly into a PC's USB or serial port. However, they're quite expensive, and the USB one looks suspiciously like a standard FTDI cable with a special connector on the end. So I thought I would try and do it without one of those cables. So what I'm using, instead of using an actual FTDI cable, I'm using an Arduino just because I already had one to hand. And it works, so we'll take a look at how I've set this up. So the first thing I've done is I've just put a little jumper wire between the reset and ground pins. That just means that the Arduino microcontroller is now completely reset, it's not doing anything. So I'm not actually using any of the software that's on this. All I'm actually using is the FTDI TTL serial to USB interface chip. Then all I've done is I've connected up this cable, which is the engineer's keypad cable, and run it inside the panel. And then all I've done on here, and that's plugged into one of the COM ports, and then I've connected 3 wires to this. One of them goes to ground on the Arduino, one of them goes to TX on the Arduino, and one goes to RX. So we've got receive and transmit and ground. It's a standard TTL serial connection, and then that just goes into the COM port, and it works. So what we'll do is we're going to take a look at the software and see it running. You could have also connected it directly inside the panel. The reason I've done this cable and wired it up inside the panel is it means that I can have the front installed. The problem is if you take the front off the panel, you have to be logged in as an engineer to stop the tamper protection going off, and that times out after a while. So when I'm filming, I don't really want to accidentally have it time out and then have the alarm go off. So I've just run this cable inside it now so I can have this all connected up without having to be logged in as an engineer. Obviously this isn't the neatest way of doing it. if you were doing this professionally or even regularly maintaining the system, you'd probably be better off buying the proper Texecom cable because it would be a lot neater. But just to quickly test it and play with the software, this actually works really well. So now let's jump up to the PC and take a look at the software. Okay, so now let's take a look at the software side of things. So here we have this old laptop and I've installed WinTex on it, which is the software that comes with the system. And it's included on that DVD it comes with. You can also download it from Texecom's website. I then plugged the Arduino in with the USB cable. Obviously you'd be using the proper, you could also use the proper Texecom cable here or a standard FTDI to USB cable. So that's plugged in here. So now let's go in closer and take a look at it running. So now here we are in WinTex. So the first thing we need to do is open the account. That's because it seems to have a concept of having multiple accounts saved for different installs. So if you're an alarm installer, you could have all your clients saved on your system and just load up their configuration. So I've only got one, so we can open that. And now we're in. So within this, I then had to configure a few things about the connection, so we can actually go to setup there and see. So we can go various things for different ways of connecting. I'm using PCCom effectively, which is the USB serial cable. So I've just said connect using COM5, which is the serial port the Arduino comes up as. And now that's there, it's ready to connect. So all we do is we go to connect, and say we want to connect using PCCom, and we're now connected. The next thing you can do is download the configuration from the panel. So you can go to receive here, receive all data, and it'll start downloading the configuration data. And as you can see, the receive and transmit lights on the Arduino are flashing away like mental right now while it's transferring all this data. And now that's done, we're ready to take a look at the configuration. So the way the system works is that you download all the configuration to the local machine, you make changes to it, and then you upload it back. It sort of makes sense, it means you're not constantly relying on that serial connection, so that's how it works. So now it's downloaded, we can go through and take a quick look at how it's all configured. So with the software you can configure all the zones. So you can see here we have all the different devices, so there's all my different PIRs and panels, etc. where they've all got names, so you can give it a name to display on the screen. You can do things such as pick what sort of zone it is, so you can see these PIRs are all guard, which means that if you walk into their view when the system's set, even if it's doing a 30-second countdown, it'll go off instantly. Then you can see things like the front door is set as entry/exit. That means that if that is triggered, it will start a 30-second countdown. There's loads of other entry types you can have as well. For example, you can have ones that say guard access, which means that normally if you walk in front of it, it'll instantly go off. But if the system's doing a 30-second countdown, it won't. So it's really configurable as to what you can do here. All these configuration options can also be set from the control panel. This just makes it a lot easier because on the panel itself, it's an okay menu system, but you're having to click through a lot of menus. Using this makes it really easy because you can just click through and see exactly how it's all configured. This is also where you can assign zones to areas. You have 4 areas, A, B, C, D, and each of those areas can have a set of zones assigned to it. You can then set each area. For example, you could have an area that would contain all the downstairs sensors, and then an area for all the upstairs sensors, and then an area for the whole house. And then you can pick what area you want to set. Do you want to set the whole house or only set downstairs, for example, if you're at night? So it's pretty flexible here. As you can see here, we've then got these zones, the first 8, which are all those wired ones which aren't actually used. So I've had to set these as not used so the tamper protection doesn't get triggered. And then obviously there's all the other zones that don't currently have anything connected to them. Next up we have the area setup. So we can go into here, and this is how you set up those 4 areas. You can configure things like the exit delay times, the entry delay times, as well as giving them names so they can be displayed clearly on the screen. You can also set the arming mode. This is what the system does when you try and arm the system in that area. Normally they're set to entry/exit, which is a nice system. It means that you press the arm button and then it waits for you to open and close the entry door, and then it arms the system. Alternatively, you can set things like timed exit, which is a more traditional way of doing it, where you just have a countdown of say 30 seconds between pressing the arm button and the system being armed. You'd probably want to use a combination of these. So if you're wanting to arm the whole house, for example, you'd want probably the entry/exit, so it'll nicely wait until you've opened and closed the door and then it'll arm, which means you're not rushing out trying to get out within a 30-second countdown. Alternatively, if you have an area that's only going to, for example, set downstairs at night, you would just set a timer because you don't want to have to open and close the front door to cause it to arm, so you can set that area as a timed exit. There's then various other options. For example, you can set here various global configuration, which is things like bell delay times and battery test periods, so how often it tests the battery, which by default is 24 hours. I've left all these as default because I don't really want to fiddle with that. There's no real reason for me to change those. You can also set up things like keypads, so you can say each keypad can set and unset certain areas and do all that sort of stuff, so it's very flexible in here. There's loads of other options as well. For example, you can set up your options there. You can set up users and configure different users in the system. It's all pretty flexible. The other cool thing you get through Wintex is you get the event log, which you do get on the panel itself, but it's not as clear. So this shows all events that have occurred with the system. For example, we can see here at 16:50 I armed the system. I then left for a wee while and then came back at 5:30 and disarmed the system. And you can see the whole system, so you can see it was armed, then there was an entry started at the front door, then I logged in, and then the system was disarmed. So you get a full log of exactly what happens to the system at any sort of time, which is really good. You'd also be able to detect what PIRs were triggered if someone broke in, for example, through this. The other thing you get in Wintex is the keypad, so you can get a virtual keypad here, which lets you do any operation that you could normally do on the main keypad. So this is also quite nice. The other cool thing you can do with the PC is monitor the whole Ricochet network. So to do that, we can go into Ricochet here, and it'll pull up the Ricochet monitor, which is a bit too flashy for my liking, but it works. So here we can see it's now detected all the devices I have. It's detected all 4 PIRs, the door contact, the external siren, and the main keypad. And this is a bit of a weird view, but effectively all it's showing is the overall health of each device and the overall state. So if, for example, a device has a low battery, it'll flag it up here. And also, even if a device senses motion, it'll flag up here. So what I'll do, for example, is I'll go through and I'll trigger one of these PIRs, and you'll be able to see it flash up on the screen. So as we can see here, that zone was triggered and the PIR detected it. So that's pretty good. So it lets you monitor the whole system. And also you can see it's now seen me detect this PIR as well. The other good thing you can do is get a whole map of the system. So we can go down to here, and this will show the network view, which shows how the network is made up. So as we can see here, all the individual sensors are connecting directly to the panel. So I don't actually have any of my sensors bouncing off other ones, which is what the Ricochet system can do. That's actually a good sign because it makes the system more responsive, probably saves battery life, and what it demonstrates here is that the signal strength from all the peripherals is completely strong enough to go throughout the flat directly to the panel without having to bounce off other devices. If you had a much larger area and the system was starting to repeat stuff through each device, you'd see that here. For example, you'd see a PIR over here and see what device it's bouncing its signal through and how it routes back to the main panel. So this is quite a nice way of visualising the whole system and keeping an eye on it all. You can also completely pointlessly go to a 3D view and spin it around because apparently that's a thing you need to see. So yeah, that is the whole PC control side of this, which is definitely nice to have. It's not essential, you can definitely configure it without this. I mean, I did all the main setup without using a PC, so you don't have to use this, which is good. But it does make it quite good if you're doing a lot of configuration and changing a lot of settings, such as configuring areas and zones. It can be quite nice to do it on a PC, on a big screen where you can see everything at once, rather than trying to click through menus on a 2-line screen that you have on the main pad. So yeah, the PC control side is definitely very nice. So there you have it. That was a look at my new burglar alarm system, which won the kits from Texecom based around their Premier Elite 64W panel. And overall it's excellent, really happy with it. It was fiddly to set up just as a complete novice, but once you got to grips with it, it was actually okay, and now it's set up, it's worked perfectly. I've been using it day in day out for probably over a month now, and have had no issues, no false alarms, nothing. It's worked brilliantly. So obviously only time will tell to see if it stays this reliable in the future, but as it is currently, I've not had any problems. So there we go, thank you very much for watching.